My name is Sergeant First Class Emily Carter, and for 18 years I believed my father was gone.
He was Army.
A quiet man who rarely talked about his missions. When I was 10 years old, two officers knocked on our door and told my mother he had died overseas, in an operation so classified that even the details of his death were sealed. There was a folded flag, a closed casket, a grave with his name on it. I grew up visiting that grave every year on his birthday, laying down a single white flower, promising him I would make him proud. I joined the Army because of him. I became an officer because of him. Every step of my career, I carried his memory like a second heartbeat. So when a 4-star general walked into my unit's command building on an ordinary Tuesday morning, I had no idea that within the next 10 minutes, my entire understanding of my father's death would shatter. He was reviewing transfer paperwork with my commanding officer. I was standing nearby, holding a folder I needed signed. And as the general bent over the desk and signed his name at the bottom of a classified authorization form, I caught a glimpse of the signature. My whole body went cold. I knew that signature. I had seen it my entire childhood. On birthday cards, on the inside cover of his old field journal, on the last letter he ever wrote to me before he died. Before I could stop myself, I said it out loud. "Sir, that's my dad's signature." The general froze. His pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the desk. The room went silent. And in that silence, I understood something I wasn't supposed to know. To understand why that moment broke me, you have to understand who my father was. His name was Master Sergeant Daniel Carter. He served in Army Special Operations, the kind of unit that doesn't appear in press releases. He was gone for long stretches, sometimes 6 months at a time, and when he came home, he was different, quieter, more watchful, like he was always listening for something the rest of us couldn't hear. My mother used to say he carried the weight of things he could never tell us. I didn't understand that as a child. I understand it now, wearing the same uniform. The night before his final deployment, he sat on the edge of my bed and told me something I never forgot. He said, "Emily, no matter what happens, know that everything I do is to protect people who can't protect themselves, even if you never understand why." 3 months later, he was gone. Or so we were told. My mother never remarried. She kept his uniform folded in a cedar chest at the foot of her bed for the rest of her life. She passed away 4 years ago, still believing what the Army had told her. I stood at her funeral, next to his grave, and made a promise that I would carry both of their memories forward with honor. That is the weight I walked into that command building with. That is the grief I had spent 18 years building my entire identity around. And that is the grief the general's frozen face told me, in an instant, might have been built on a lie. My commanding officer cleared the room within seconds. Junior staff were dismissed. Doors were shut. I stood there, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it, waiting for someone to explain what I had just seen. The general, General Marcus Reyes, finally spoke, his voice low and careful. "Sergeant Carter, sit down." I didn't move. "Sir, with respect, I need you to tell me why my father's signature was on that document. My father died 18 years ago." He looked at me for a long moment, and something in his expression cracked. Not anger.
Guilt.
"Your father did not die in that operation," he said quietly. "He was presumed dead because of a mission that went catastrophically wrong, one that exposed corruption inside his own chain of command. A senior officer had been selling classified intelligence to outside buyers. Your father found proof. Before he could report it through normal channels, that officer arranged for his unit's extraction to be sabotaged. My knees nearly gave out. He survived," General Reyes continued. "Barely. But the man responsible still had enough influence to bury the truth. If your father had come home, the corruption would have unraveled and taken half the command structure with it. Men still active, still dangerous. So the Army made a decision. They told your father, and only your father, that his official death would protect his family, and that he would be reassigned under a new identity to finish what he started, quietly, from the inside." I couldn't breathe. "You're telling me my father has been alive this whole time?" He nodded slowly.
Yes.
"And that signature you saw, it wasn't a mistake. It was the final authorization closing out an 18-year investigation. Today, we finally have enough evidence to end it. I sat in that room feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath me. 18 years of grief. 18 birthdays without him. My mother dying without ever knowing the truth. And it turned out my father had been alive the entire time, forced into silence by a system that decided our pain was an acceptable price for justice. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was. But another part of me, the part that had worn this same uniform my whole adult life, understood exactly what kind of sacrifice that decision represented. Why now? I asked. Why did this come out today of all days? General Reyes explained that the corrupt officer, now a retired colonel with powerful friends, had recently attempted to resurface, angling for a consulting position with access to sensitive defense contracts. The moment his name came back into the system, it triggered the final phase of the case my father had spent nearly 2 decades quietly building from the shadows. Your father has been feeding us information for years, the general said. Financial records, communications,
Names.
He never stopped working to bring this man down, even while the world believed he was gone. I thought about every lonely birthday, every year I stood at an empty grave. And then General Reyes said the words that changed everything. Sergeant Carter, your father is being brought back today. Officially.
Publicly.
And he asked, if this day ever came, that you be the one to help finish it. 2 hours later, I sat in a secure briefing room, and for the first time in 18 years, I saw my father's face, older, worn, but unmistakably him. There are no words for that reunion. I won't pretend to have them. We held each other in a silence that carried 18 years of loss, and neither of us needed to explain it. But there was still work to do. The retired colonel, a man named Walter Dobbs, had spent 2 decades believing his crime was buried with a dead soldier's name. He had built a comfortable life on a foundation of stolen secrets and a family's grief. He had no idea the very man he tried to erase had spent all those years quietly building the case that would finally expose him. My father had kept meticulous records, smuggled documents, recorded conversations, financial trails proving Dobbs had sold classified intelligence for personal profit and orchestrated the sabotage that nearly ended my father's life. Every piece had been verified. Every witness corroborated. The case was airtight. I asked to be there when it was presented. My father agreed. We walked into that hearing together, a father who had sacrificed his own name for the truth, and a daughter who had spent her whole life honoring a man she thought was gone, never knowing he was still fighting for justice from the shadows. Walter Dobbs sat across the table, confident, dismissive, clearly expecting another quiet meeting he could smooth over with his connections. That confidence lasted exactly as long as it took my father to walk through the door. I watched the color drain from his face. He looked like he was seeing a ghost because in his mind, he was. The evidence was laid out piece by piece. Financial transfers tied directly to his personal accounts. Recorded admissions from an old contact who had turned on him years earlier. Documentation proving he had knowingly falsified an extraction order that endangered an entire unit to protect his own secret. Dobbs tried to argue, tried to threaten, tried to remind the room of the influential friends he still had. But 18 years of quiet, patient work does not unravel in a single afternoon of bluster. The evidence spoke for itself, undeniable and complete. Within the hour, he was formally stripped of his remaining honors, referred for criminal prosecution, and escorted out of the building he once thought he controlled. The man who had erased my father's identity to protect himself watched his own identity collapse in front of the very family he had shattered. I felt no satisfaction in cruelty. I felt something quieter and stronger, relief. The kind that comes when the truth finally outweighs the lie that buried it. In the weeks that followed, my father's story was formally corrected. His record was restored. He received the recognition he had been denied for nearly 2 decades, including honors for the very case that had once required his disappearance. We visited my mother's grave together. He knelt beside the headstone he had never been allowed to see and said the things he had carried silently for 18 years. I stood beside him, finally understanding the weight he had spoken of that night before his final deployment, protecting people who could never know the cost. We are rebuilding what was taken from us, slowly. Some wounds don't heal in a single conversation. But every day, I get to know a father I thought I had lost forever, and every day, that feels like a gift I never expected to receive. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that the truth doesn't disappear just because it's buried. It waits. Sometimes for years. Sometimes for decades. But eventually, it finds its way to the surface, and when it does, it brings justice with it. My father lost 18 years standing in the shadows to protect people he loved and a truth he believed in. I lost 18 years grieving a man who was still fighting for us the entire time. And the man who thought he could erase all of it discovered too late that some things, a father's love, a daughter's memory, and the truth itself, cannot be buried forever. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments. And if you believe the truth always finds its way home, share this with someone who needs to hear it today.